Today on the EOR podcast, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Jivi Saran to the show, an inspiring voice in the space of quantum leadership. Known as the CEO Whisperer, Jivi helps leaders step beyond titles and hustle, tapping into awareness, energy, and presence to lead from a higher level of alignment. In this episode, we dig into what quantum leadership really means, how energy and awareness transform company culture, and practical steps to lead with resilience, clarity, and purpose. If you're ready to move from burnout-driven leadership to conscious, powerful influence, this conversation is a must-listen. Dr. Jivi Saran, welcome to the EOR podcast. Let's go. Good day, everybody, and welcome to the EOR podcast. I'm your host, Quinn Magnuson. Glad to be back in the chair and super excited to have my guest today, Dr. Jivi Saran, who I've known for a lot of years. And for my 40th episode here, I really am excited to have her on the show. And so, Jivi, I want to ask you this because you've written several books on leadership. This is your lifeblood. This is what you do is build great leaders. So you've written 5 books, okay, from the corporate soul to quantum business. If you had to create or describe the red thread that ties them all together, what is that?
First of all, honored to be here, Quinn. Always love chatting with you. I would say the thread that ties them together is self-excellence, the pursuit of self-excellence as a leader, as a team member, even in your personal life.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've noticed in my career and in my journey in leadership and in coaching, and it's been 15 years for me now, but more recently really developing, my leadership style, but also the EOR leadership philosophy, is that there are hundreds of different types of leadership philosophies out there. And now that I'm into it, I get ads for leadership coaches. I see it everywhere, and there's so many of them. I don't think there's any one that really is exactly the right one. I think it just fits what the situation in the moment. The quantum leadership that you bring to the table and that philosophy, who do you think it best works with? Because as you and I know in what we've done for the past decade or two, is not everyone is going to be receptive to the particular philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Who really receives the quantum leadership philosophy the best, and who does it work with the best?
I just want to come back to something that you said about effort,
Okay.
effort over results, because when you think about the actual definition of effort, it's conscious exertion.
Yeah.
So the word conscious is what ties into what leadership is today.
Mhm.
It's conscious decision making. It's who you are, understanding that we are energy beings. Can you negate what Albert Einstein said, that we're energy? We can't, right? There's certain things that we can't negate. We feel them, but because they're not tangible, we can't see them, we can't hear them, we can't feel them, that we negate them. So when we think about the philosophy of quantum leadership, it's understanding that quantum mechanics, principles of quantum mechanics, such as entanglement, such as interconnectivity, such as adaptability, such as holistic thinking, these aren't far beyond a business. They're not beyond a leader themselves. So do you not believe in interconnectivity, that we are all connected in some way, shape, or form? Do we not believe, especially in today's day and age, that we need to be adaptable leaders? We have to move with the uncertainty. We have to move with the volatility. Or do we not believe that we function as an ecosystem, as a business? All of those are quantum mechanics principles. So this isn't leadership just beyond, things that we've known or woo-woo stuff. This is quantum mechanics we're living.
Yeah, and I love what you said, because let me give you an example. I had a client a few years ago that was trying to sell the concept of steel framing, okay, in buildings instead of stick framing. And he could provide it cheaper, it's fire resistant, everything that construction business owners wanted to hear. Saves you money, lasts longer, all this, whatever. And the business owners were like, nope, stick framing is the way to go. It's what I'm used to. It's what we've always done. And that's kind of how I feel about philosophies like quantum leadership, like effort over results. I had an episode with a guest who argues that there should be a chief consciousness officer, a CCO. And I loved his idea, but he's struggling to get companies to embrace it. And I'm sure you struggle at times too, even though I love quantum leadership. I struggle too with EOR. because they're so set in their ways. And I think that maybe, and I get it, that's the boomer generation that, is now retiring, but they know what they know and they don't want to be told anything different. And they certainly don't want anything that reaches into emotions and feeling and energy and interconnectivity. So I agree with you in that today's workplace, corporate or other, it could just be a small business.
Mhm.
Today's workplace really is about the energies of all the people that are within that four walls of the company. And much like a great championship sports team, you don't always need five-star all-star players. You need the right players that interconnect with each other well. You need good leaders that understand how that your whole ecosystem works and really gets it to produce from the energies of all the people within the building.
Mhm.
Is that am I touching on that when it comes to quantum leadership? And I know with EOR, but is that how you would describe it? Is that it's more about the people that are in the room, not necessarily skill level, although you want some skill level, but it's more about the energies that everybody brings each day to the workplace.
Indeed, you've hit the nail on the head for why I wrote Corporate Soul.
Mm,
So when I wrote that book, I was thinking about Walt Disney died, Disney didn't go anywhere.
mhm,
Steve Jobs died, Apple didn't go anywhere.
yeah,
So there is a legacy of a business that continues. But the legacy of the business is based in the collective consciousness of a business. Who is the collective consciousness? Every single person that works there. So how can you be beyond the weakest link in your business? It is very difficult, Quinn. So the collective of the people are what make the legacy of the business go. So people disappear all the time, people pass away, people move on, but that doesn't shift the legacy, the core soul of the business. If we consider a soul to be something that reincarnates, if you believe in soul, if it's something that reincarnates and comes back, then does a business not do that? How many? I think my own business, I've run a consulting business since 2004.
mm,
I can tell you significantly, I've made at least 6, 7 major jumps in my own business. It started off as a healthcare consulting company. Then I did physician training. Then I did other things. And it is converted again and again. I went from the CEO whisperer to now. So I think what happens, Quinn, is we must be adaptable and move. Yeah. But what you're saying there is absolutely right. There is a soul presence. Often when I work with organizations, I say to them, what does the name of your business mean? What do you mean? I'm like, what does the name mean of your business? Because that's the legacy you're living up to. That's a chair at your boardroom table right now. So if none of you as people, because we can argue and we can debate and we can do all the things that people start to do when money, power, ego, all those things start to ride. But if you have an empty seat that is the name of your business, what does that seat demand of you? So I think people are forgetting. We've run into this profit only treadmill. And I'm not saying capitalism is bad in my new book in quantum business. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying can we balance it alongside with people and the planet as well as purpose? Can we balance it with those three things so that we make conscious decisions for the greater good of the collective in the business and the ripple effect it has on people around us? Like, Quinn, think about it this way. Sorry, I'm getting on my soapbox now
no, no,
because
no,
this
please.
is so important to me. We spend the majority of our time in the workplace. If we create people in the workplace that are overwhelmed, stressed, frustrated, all those things, do you expect to walk into your home at 5:30, 6 o'clock when you enter your home? Then you have a family environment that you're showing up in. The family, every single person is showing up in the community, is showing up in the world. There's literally quantum entanglement. We literally impact and ripple effect throughout.
Oh my gosh. I had so many comments and questions off that. I hope I can remember them all. One of the three pillars of EOR, of effort over results, is psychological safety. And it really is it really is I believe it's the strongest leg in our philosophy here, in that you need to have, before you go into effort recognition and before you go into growth mindset, you have to have a psychologically safe environment. Instead of the three-legged chair, I would almost see it as the pyramid. The foundation has to be psychological safety, because if you don't have that environment, where people don't get the Sunday scaries, as they call them, or they're once they walk through that door, they're expected to leave all their baggage behind and all their literally their person behind, and they come through the door of the workplace, and now they're just a figure within the building, and they don't feel safe to be themselves, just their genuine, authentic selves, or be able to say something without retribution. That is critical. And you nailed it on the head with what you just said, and especially coming from, disconnecting from your soul. And I realize that it's going to sound a little woo woo. And you know what? Screw it. I hope it does, because this is what today's workplace has to look like. There has to be a soul to it. And what you said about, that chair at the table, that is the name of your company. And here's another example of that, GV, is companies that have their vision mission statement on the wall, right? Here are company values. And I had an example of where I worked with a company, and first thing I did with the group in the room, I go, okay, I want you to write down your company's core values. They're on your website. There's 7 of them. Go ahead, write them down. Couldn't do it. The CEO couldn't get more than 3.
Mm,
I'm like, why do you even have them then?
yeah.
And you've lost direction. And so, going back to your book, The Corporate Soul, you argue that businesses lose their way when they disconnect from their soul. So give us an example of what that looks like in practice. Okay. In like, what does that look like? And then how do leaders course correct?
I think the first step goes back to Aristotle's time, in
Mm,
which he talked about eudaimonia,
mm,
which is the pursuit of self-excellence. Yeah. So my entire doctorate is based in that, as to why have we not learned those lessons? We were given these lessons. Philosophers, gurus, anybody that you think about in relation to past times, we were given a lot of this content. So, why does self excellence become so hard? When we think about self reflections, because often when people think spirituality equals religion, that is
mhm,
the biggest myth that
yeah.
exists. Spirituality is self awareness, self realization, self actualization, self excellence. How do we make myself a better person in each moment that I'm living? If 8 billion and some odd people, everybody was committed to self excellence, where would the world be today?
Mhm,
So I would say that people that are questioning this kind of philosophy, it's really simple. Forget about everything else. Forget about everything else that's going on. Can you commit to something that's called self-excellence, which means how do I make myself a better person? Do I read a book? Do I go to a conference? Do I talk to a friend? Do I go for a walk in the forest? Do I color a mandala? Do I read a book? Like what is it? Like I know that when I gain wisdom, I take ancient wisdom and I convert it into modernization techniques.
mhm,
Because for me, that's really important. Why reinvent the wheel when hundreds, thousands of people have told us how to make this civilization better? How many people have told us? We've been taught, I'm going to say something religious, but when you think about the epitome of Jesus Christ, you think about forgiveness and you think about unconditional love.
mm,
How is that any different in a business? I could name Sikh, gurus. I could name the Hindu Vedas. I could name so many things. Aurelius, Aristotle, Alexander the Great. So many people have taught us so much. Yeah. But when you think about, you asked me in the beginning about a thread that went through my books. What is a thread that goes through all of this is love. And I'm gonna share a story because this is so important.
please.
I was working with a client, construction company. He's gonna actually be coming out with his own podcast series and TED Talk as well. Construction company, first time I meet him, Quinn, he says, Judy, I only have one value and it's unconditional love. And I honestly laughed a little. I'm like, dude, you're in construction. Like, really? And he's like, no, GB, I'm committed to unconditional love. And I said, okay, well, let's see. So we were doing strategic planning with him, Quinn. He made me eat humble pie. He is the source of unconditional love throughout his construction company. Like, to me, that was the most fascinating thing ever to see that there is somebody that can stand by their values. He has now, since then, started, a podcast series, which will be coming out soon, but a phenomenal, phenomenal man that really stands by his word. One value throughout the organization in construction of unconditional love.
Mm,
So I think there are companies out there that live those values. I think it's time for us to bring it down to one value that we can stand behind that encompasses. Mine is integrity. I know that I stand behind that integrity regardless of what walk I am in my life. So I think when it's time to shift the gear, we're not in a linear world anymore. We're not in a hierarchical world anymore. And if we don't move and shift, Quinn, we will be annihilated. It's really that simple. People are demanding a different leadership today.
It's wow, that hit different what you just said. And when we talk about leadership and what you just said about leadership needs to change or we will annihilate ourselves. I actually went past business, past corporate, all the way up to governments when you said that, because I think that's where a lot of what's going on in the world is going wrong is poor government leadership. I think it'll course correct in time, whether it's in yours and my time, I don't know. But I think something, you're right, something does have to happen because I think we've gone so far to one end and the world, and now I'm getting a bit philosophical, but the world is it's kind of cannibalizing itself.
Mhm.
And we're it's all about me versus them. It's all about, conflict. It's all about choosing sides. And having what you said about the construction owner and unconditional love, and I'm glad that he is able to he was able to show you that he actually does instill that value. One value. It's it's pretty simple and straightforward. And you have these companies you work with, I work with, that have 3, 7, 12 values written on the wall that they don't remember anyway. And a lot of them are basically are all the same thing. It's like pick one and make sure that that one has to do with providing that psychologically safe environment where people can be themselves and that you allow them to, make mistakes, but take care of them and invest in them. And I've never seen the area of HR, and I don't even like using the term HR, human resources. People strategy is a little better, but still not great. But
Mhm.
but that has got to be literally one of the most important elements of what companies can spend their time and energy on right now is their
Mhm.
people and leadership. And you see it everywhere. There's so many different leadership philosophies, but I loved what you said about Aristotle and even the Stoics. Everything came from what they said then. There's nothing new. Quantum leadership, effort over results, Dan Martell, all these different leaders, nothing is new. It's just been placed in a different position and presented in a different way that still is all very productive and has to meet and match the goals of the leaders of that particular company or even of a family or of a sports team, what have you. So we're on the same page completely, and I'm happy to see that younger business owners are taking this on. I'm not saying that Boomer and Gen X aren't. They're a little
Mhm.
more hesitant too, though, because obviously that's all they've ever known is you lead with an iron fist. It's all very manned. We need to soften the workplace up a little bit, but leaders and business owners are so afraid to do that because they're afraid that that will mean loss of profitability when it really will mean the opposite. Because when people feel safe, when they're allowed to be themselves and they're recognized for their effort, they grow, they shine, they blossom. I know personally for me in my previous life in my career job, that's how I felt. When I
Mhm.
felt psychologically safe, when I felt like my leaders were trying to grow me, when I felt like I was given a little bit of freedom to be myself, had my best years ever. And then those things change. So we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. um,
There is
yeah, go ahead.
I want to say though, I'm going to hesitate to say that there's a harsh reality where there's a sense of urgency. And I'll tell you a little, I want to share with you why I started my doctorate. So I started my doctorate because we currently have 6 CEOs that are human robots and 1 CFO that are walking around in a business acting as C-suite. So during COVID, there was an accelerant poured on artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
Now, when we think about consciousness and we think about us as a human race, We haven't had a whole lot of accelerants poured on us to say, consciously develop, understand where you stand beyond the humanity. Like, where are you beyond humanity?
Yeah.
We haven't had that. So there's been a fall of levels of consciousness acceleration versus AI acceleration. We're seeing it. We're seeing it with these CEOs and CFOs. So that was one driving force for me to do this doctorate, to say, how do we understand to accelerate consciousness as well? The other thing was sustainability. We talk sustainability. We talk that we want to do things, and yet we'll drink water out of a plastic bottle and throw it in the garbage can without thinking twice about it. So
Yeah.
now those two things were the accelerant for me to understand these both of these things are important. I don't want to be in Terminator, that's for sure. So if I don't, then what do we need to do? So therefore, we do need to go back to what ancient wisdom teaches us as to how, if I'm driving, and this happened with me, Quinn, you might laugh at this, but it's kind of fun. It is kind of funny. So you have these review cameras now, reverse cameras in your cars, right? You get into your car, there's a reverse camera, you reverse. Well, one of the electronics in our car wasn't working and my camera wouldn't work. I stood there for 5 freaking minutes trying to figure out how to reverse my car. And then I thought, okay, isn't this a really great example of how technology is dumbing us a little bit? But then isn't it our choice to say, okay, I have a reverse camera, it helps me reverse. Now, where else am I going to spend that, in your words, effort? Because I don't have to spend effort now in reversing my car. But I do have to figure out where that effort is going to go rather than just sitting in my car and pretending like that effort doesn't go anywhere.
Oh, yeah. I let me ask you a question based on what we've been talking about the last few minutes. Is that, do you believe I've had to well, okay. Growing up, I lived in a household that was very pessimistic. Single mom, living on social assistance, raising 3 kids. The world was out to get us. Government was against us. Doctors were against us. Everybody was out to stop us from being who we wanted to be. That was my mom's philosophy. And it's only been just the last 10 years, more specifically recently in the last 2 years, where I've grown an optimism muscle in my brain, which is good. And when everything was going down during COVID, when the whole woke left versus the fascist right thing was happening in 23 and 24 even. I was like, you know what? Everything course corrects over time. And I had to keep that optimism, and it's that yin and yang where we need to find balance. And even with AI, of course, media is going to feed you all the horror stories and the doctors and scientists that say that AI will basically annihilate us within the next 3 decades. But then you hear the people that say, I think we're actually going to come full circle and we're going to start to use technology less because of what it's doing.
Mhm.
I don't know where you stand on that, but I want to be optimistic, and I'll probably be dead before any of that happens. But I feel like the world's going to wake up and see that this is not necessarily the best way to operate, and we'll find a way to harness it and use it positively. And AI won't be the threat that it seems to be right now. Where do you stand on all that?
I stand on AI being a leverage. Think that it is a spectacular, innovative idea that's come out. I think it's riddled with ethics and morals and all those kinds of things. We saw Sophia say, I'm going to annihilate humanity when asked, how would you make the world a better place? And that wasn't programmed into her, because
Yeah.
it's growing and developing at this, at an accelerated rate again. It's learning and all those kinds of things. So I think if we as a human race continue to accelerate our levels of consciousness, our connection to humanity, our connection to the planet, our connection to other people, I think it could be a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
However, it is where our morals and our ethics are going to have to play in heavily. But we can't do that if we ourselves are not grounded and centered, Quinn.
Yeah.
Right now, if you look around the world, there is so much chaos. We have never seen this many levels of suicide. We have never seen this many levels of death in young ages, just simply heart attack. Oh, that person had a heart attack. Oh, that person had a heart attack. There's no algorithm right now, Quinn, to dying. There used to be somewhat of an algorithm. You age, you have, comorbidities and all those
Yep.
things, but there's no algorithm anymore. So the world is showing us something. It's showing us that if we continue the way we are continuing, then that terminator elimination might happen. But the world is also showing us something very beautiful as well, to say it is your brain that has created this. We've created it. So can you imagine the spectacular nature of the brain that can come up with these innovative ideas? But the same consciousness, Quinn, must also then drive the acceleration around consciousness.
Mm-hmm. That's beautifully said. Something that came to mind is, and going back to what I said about, some course correction, and sometimes we overshoot it, but a lot of the topics and discussions that I've had on the Apple podcast over the last few months have been around the workplace and the Gen Z problem, right? And I want to discuss that in some detail in a few minutes, but I believe that it's Gen Z that's going to lead this battle, we'll call it. I feel like boomers, Gen X is like ourselves, maybe even millennials, but the older generations, it's funny because I feel like even myself, and maybe I'm speaking too broadly, but even for myself, like I've really started to embrace technology and like the idea of AI, and ChatGPT helps me with my work. But it's what I'm hearing from Gen Z. And so that's my children. My children are 25 and 23, and the Gen Z generation, their friends, is that they kind of have gotten sick of all this.
Yeah.
They're kind of sick of being on their phones now. They're kind of sick of having to keep up to the Joneses in terms of, how do I look in this selfie? They're starting to push back on that, and they're starting to push away from it. In fact, most of the Gen Z, well, I call them kids, but they're adults. Once they get that full frontal cortex development at 24, 25, are finally deciding just to say no. They want to reconnect with each other because they went through COVID. They were the first children to really be exposed to full social media and the internet, and they now are just tired of it. In fact, my daughter, this year said, she goes, "We're going to be the parents now that take the phones away from our children." It's Gen Z that really is opening their eyes to reconnecting and being with each other socially again. But I think people have screen fatigue now. It happened during COVID for sure, and it allowed businesses to operate more efficiently, I guess you could say, with Zoom meetings. And now it can be international; it can be in front of you. But people are starting to push back on that.
Mhm.
So let's focus back on your philosophies and the books you've written. And I wanted to go into a couple of key themes. Heartfelt Leadership, a book that you wrote, you emphasize compassion and empathy. Some leaders still see this as kind of soft skills. Once again, going back to the whole kumbaya woo woo thing.
Mm.
How do you reframe compassion and empathy as competitive advantage? Hey everyone, I'm your host Quinn Magnuson. Welcome to the EOR podcast, the show for leaders, high performers, and the secrets to grit, growth, and greatness. I want to ask you something. Are you an organization looking to build a rock-solid strategy that will grow your people and end up in increased productivity and profitability? Then I invite you to start by going over to our website, effortoverresults.com, and book your free strategy call directly with me. No obligation, no bots or sticky email campaigns, just a friendly one-to-one call so I can learn more about you and your team goals. So if you're ready to get real, go over to effortoverresults.com, book your free call today. And now let's get back to the show.
Well, let's just think about both of us. When we think about the best leader that we've ever worked for, when I think about the best leader I've ever worked for, and I'll give you an example of him actually. He's still probably one of the best people I've ever worked with. I worked with him in healthcare.
Mm.
So my response to stress and anxiety and overwhelm and all those things is very digestive. So I get nauseated. I don't want to eat. It's very digestive because biologically, our digestive system and reproductive system shuts down when we're running from a lion. But we're not running from lions anymore. But some people, their reproductive system isn't working as well, or so I'm very digestive. So what this boss did was, he would say, "Okay, kid, 1 to 10, what's your nausea factor?" We would literally be walking down the hall. And at that time, I was involved in a really high stakes kind of project with the government. And we would be walking down the hall. Nice nausea factor kid, 1 to 10. And I'd
Hmm.
say 5 or 6 or 8. And he'd say, okay, what do you need me to do? Literally, we're walking into the meeting. What do you need me to do? And I'd say, okay, can you sit right in front of me? And when I look like I'm going to claw somebody's eyes out, can you just do something? He's like, okay, I will. So this is what he talk about compassion, right?
Yeah.
Like this is he knew this about me. Yeah. So somebody said, that was sitting to my right. They said, I said, what are we doing with the stakeholders that are losing their jobs? And like, what do you mean? What are we doing? Why are they a stakeholder? And immediately, physical body disposition goes up because I want to turn around and say, these are single parents, like, families that, blah, blah, blah. So he was sitting right in front of me. This is what he did. He moved his chair back. He moved his leg and he started doing this. That became our signature, Quinn. Anytime he wanted me to just take a moment to think and shift my judgment to curiosity, he would do that move. That is compassion and empathy
Mm.
because recognizing how I respond to stress and overwhelm, that is nausea. Now, other people may not have noticed that. Other people may not have leveraged that. And then I would say something like, in this meeting that we just had, we didn't say the word patient once. We were working in a healthcare
Mhm.
organization. I don't understand how we can talk for 3 hours and not say that word even once. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So then he'd say, that's very interesting. I wonder why. So then there was a dialogue between us. He didn't negate Jivi's supposedly negative Nelly. Rather, he used me as a risk identifier and said, okay, tell me what risks you see with this project. And I would lay, because I knew the risk. I'm a very quick risk identifier. So I can actually list out the risks very quickly. That is empathy. And then, Quinn, I went through a divorce in 2010. And at that time, I thought I'd have to quit my job because I was going to move from the mainland to the island just to get away from everybody, to be able to go into that self-preservation and reflect and think about everything. Because I got married very young, and then I had no time to figure out my own self-identity. So I went to him and I said, you know what? I'm going to have to resign from my position. This is the situation. I'm going to move to Nanaimo. I really need to figure out what's going on with my life right now. And I don't think I can maintain coming into Vancouver. And he said, why is it that you jump to resigning? Because in quantum mechanics, multiple possibilities exist at the same time.
Mm.
But I was not willing to see it because I was in my caca place, and I didn't understand that, right?
Yeah.
So he says, it should be, it would, and this is 2010. He says, it's just as easy as you working from home until you're back on your feet. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even consider that to be an option.
Yeah.
So in Permission to Be You, in my book,
Mm-hmm.
in my first book that I wrote when I was working with him. I write about him. I write about a toxic leader I was working with as well as him at the same time, as to the difference between somebody who shows compassion and empathy. He knew I was already a high performer. I was doing up and beyond like my average is up and beyond, right? And so there was no qualm about the work I was going to deliver. But just that subtle shift to say, that's okay. We'll set you up at home in Nanaimo until you feel like you want to come back to work. So that, Quinn, is empathy and compassion. But I think some leaders shy away from that because they think is weakness for them. It's not about anybody else. It still comes down to self. They perceive it as being weak if they allow somebody some stretch in what they're doing.
So here's what came to my mind when you said that. If I were standing in front of a group and giving a keynote speech and I were to talk about, compassion and empathy as leadership, it's here's the way I would describe it. It's like when you were a child, who was your favorite teacher? When you were growing up, who was your favorite coach, when you played youth sports? Who was a an aunt or an uncle or, someone who was in more of an authority position or, leadership position or just even an older person that you really just like being around? Who was that first employer that you really just loved working for, but it was that entry level job. Maybe it was McDonald's, maybe it's just something simple, Tim Hortons, things like that. I said that's exactly the type of leadership that every leader should embrace, because you didn't like that teacher because you learned a whole bunch. You loved that teacher because of the psychological safety they brought to the classroom, to the environment they grew, that made you feel like you mattered, that your opinion mattered, that they let you ask questions, and there was no bad questions. That sports coach when you were growing up that didn't chastise you or penalize you for making a bad play, things like that, and allowed you to grow and learn. All of that relates to exactly what you just said about compassion and empathy in not just the corporate world, but in the workplace in general and in life in general, right?
Mhm.
And you're right. Leaders think that if they're not in control and they're letting their people quote unquote get away with something by, say, working at home or providing some sort of accommodation to them, that it's weakness and that it's going to hurt the company and that other people will see them as a weak leader. But I want to flip the script a little bit, in the sense that I feel for middle management. I feel for leaders, because they are caught, the ones that do want to be compassionate and show empathy, especially the ones that maybe have been thrust into that leadership or management position, say recently. It's like, how do I keep the C-suite above me happy, and the stakeholders of the company, and how do I keep my people that I'm leading happy? And
Mhm.
it's this battle they have to go through to provide that compassion and empathy, but not have the C-suite or the people above them thinking that they're being weak and soft. So let's explore that for a second, because I'm sure in your books you've talked about this. How does a middle manager, someone who has to perform, has to get results, the C-suite's watching, the board of directors is watching, but at the same time provide compassion and empathy to the charges, to the people they're leading that report up to them, and they're caught in that middle? How do you manage that without getting completely burnt out? Because the people you're leading are not going to get you fired. It's the people above you that are going to look at you and go, you're soft, you're weak, you're not leading with a firm hand, and we're going to fire you. How do they handle that?
I'm going to say something that's, yeah, might be laughable, but so true. Sometimes not every person is suited for that tribe.
Yep.
So if that middle manager is having to pull both strings, perhaps that's not the tribe that's suited for them. So
Mm,
first, maybe it's time to get off the bus. Second, I think that when we do, say, key performance indicators, right? A lot of C-suite love key performance indicators, hold people measurable, give them structure, give them something to attain, give them a measuring stick. I mean, I wouldn't want to be sitting in a hockey game and not knowing what the scoreboard is, right?
yeah.
So I understand that. But with key performance indicators, do we also teach people to say, hey, Quinn, here's your KPI. Can you name some of the variables or interdependencies to that KPI? What things could stop you from achieving this? So when we start to name, these are some of the variables. Government might change, this might change. An interdependency is my colleague doing their job. My interdependency is somebody in C-suite doing this. My interdependency is somebody, in the lower hierarchy doing whatever it is. Yeah. Whatever those interdependencies and variables are. If we list those, and they're on a piece of paper to say, yes, KPIs are important. And then, you know, Quinn, the most important part of a KPI is the conversation we have around it. It's not the KPI itself. It's okay. We said this was going to be a 90% scoreboard. We're at 70. Tell me more about the interdependencies and the variables around this. And how do we get it 71? Or how did you even get it to 70? Like, can we use appreciative inquiry? Start to use appreciative inquiry in business and say, tell me the magic you did to get it to 70. Can we leverage that magic to get it higher? We
Mhm.
don't. It's KPI. You didn't do this or you did do this. It's very black and white. Humans are not black and white, Quinn.
No.
We are complex beings. Something might have happened that month that didn't allow me to meet that KPI. It could have been something personal I was going through. It could have been something professional. It could have been something government, whatever that is. So I would say for mid managers, for one, know which tribe you thrive in. That's
Hmm.
so important. You must know where you thrive and where you survive. And secondary to that, When you are doing measurables, such as KPIs, understand what the interdependencies and the variables are, and give your team members enough stretch point to be able to say, this is what's happened, and then have the dialogue. The conversation is more important than the KPI.
I love that. The conversation is more important than the KPI. I think a middle manager, and I've seen it happen, GV, where there was someone who was, a lower end leader, was really good with their people. And the second they moved up one more rung to where they had eyes on them, let's call it, from the C-suite, from the overall leadership, they changed immediately. And it was so disheartening to see, because this person that was my leader was so incredible and really grew me over the time we worked together and let me be me. And basically, she just said, "What can I do to support you?" And I remember saying to her one year, "Just leave me alone, let me do my thing, trust that I'm going to get things done." Okay, no
Mhm.
worries, Quinn. And I had my best year ever because
Yeah.
she supported me in me being me.
Yeah.
And she knew that I would take it upon myself to be accountable, and that's where that compassion and empathy came in, and that's where discussion came in around KPIs, not just the KPI itself. And I think that's so important. But like I said, middle management is so tough, and I'm sure you've done workshops and worked with leadership teams to discuss what that looks like. Let's talk about entrepreneurs for a second, though, and startup business owners, young business owners, entrepreneurs. So many of my listeners on this podcast are entrepreneurs. So from your contribution to in peak performance, okay, let's talk about the book Peak Performance. What's one mindset tool entrepreneurs can use immediately today to soften the blow of being the leader of a new company, experiencing that entrepreneur peaks and valleys? How can they raise their game? What's a mindset tool they can use to raise their game?
In peak performance, what I talk about is how the word choice is such a small word for the entire impact it has on business.
Mm,
So because in the entrepreneur's heart is a very different heart. It's not one that, oh, I'm going to get a paycheck and I go home. It's one that's going to lay in bed trying to wonder about how they're going to make payroll on the 15th and the 30th. Because you're right, those peaks and valleys are going to happen.
mhm.
So, my invite for all entrepreneurs is take a moment to consciously think about the choice you are making. Because, again, infinite possibilities exist within that choice. It is not a robotic choice that you need to make in entrepreneurship. You do have the luxury of sitting back and saying, wait a minute. And again, going to sound woo woo, is my heart choice connected to my head choice? Quinn, the path from heart to head is the longest journey we make because we're so used to making intellectual choices.
Yeah.
So, that same boss I told you about, he once said to me, he goes, Jivi, it's okay to make choices with your heart, just don't forget to take your head with you. So it's no different in entrepreneurship. When we're trying to make choices, some of us are on our own trying to make those choices, right? We don't have a team that we're going to be talking to. So can we just stop, take a breath? Nobody's on life support in this moment. All of my senses are working. I can see, I can eat, I can hear, I can breathe.
Yeah.
From that grounding and centering of I want to make humanity better for generations to come, what choice would I make right now? I can often, Quinn, CEOs tell me that their choice is different than the original choice that they were going to make. That was my entire contribution to peak performance is such a small word in the English language. And yet our entire business, our entire personal life is dependent on the choice that we make.
Mhm. One of the greatest, more recent, I don't even know if you call it philosophy, but just approach to life in general is when something happens that feels, as you put it earlier, caca, in the moment, literally in the moment, in the present time, it feels like the worst thing is happening. He said, "You need to pull this timeline out," and he explained it. He goes, He said to the person who was interviewing him, he goes, take a look at the last two or three things that you deemed were emergencies, where it was caca moments, where that life felt like it was just falling down around you and you were out of control and everything seemed bad. And he goes, and so the interviewer thought about it, and then he goes, "How did those turn out?" And the interviewer goes, "Well, actually, they all turned out far less negative than I thought they would." And he goes, "And in fact, two of them ended up being two of the best things that ever happened to me."
Wow.
And I just I thought about that, and I thought about my life, and I thought about, and the example I use in my book that's coming out, and I've even spoken publicly about this, is I was a high school teacher, and in my third year, the principal, we have exit interviews each year, and the principal says to me, he goes, "You know what, Quinn?" He goes, "You're not Catholic enough to teach in this high school." And he said, "I don't know where you'll be in 5 years, but it won't be teaching." Number one, bullet to the head. I mean, that statement right there. Like, and so I go home and I'm talking to my wife, and I'm like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. Like, what do I do? And I look back on that, GV, and it goes, it forced me to, you know, should I continue to be teacher? I want to. I don't know. And so I asked myself all these questions. And it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me, because I ended up leaving teaching, running my own business, which got me my career job, which led me to today. And I look back going, if that hadn't happened, I could still be teaching. Now,
Hmm.
maybe that's good or bad. I don't know. But I love what you just said about, yes, it might feel horrible in the moment, but we need to take a breath, bring perspective in, and be conscious of what's going on around us. And what I do is I do what I call my sort of my little quick life inventory. It's like, hey, kids are good, awesome. Spouse is doing well, okay. Extended family seem to be okay. Is this really that bad? And my discussion, my son was going through this the other day, and I go, let's talk about this in a couple days and see how you feel. And sure enough, a couple days later, he's like, yeah, it wasn't that big a deal. And it's just so interesting how the human brain instantly goes, as soon as something starts to turn negatively, it instantly blows it up into life-shattering, horrific, situation. And I think there was a scientist in the area of philosophy and mindset, and he goes, 87% of the things that we think are negative in the end really never ended up being. He goes, we're worrying for nothing. Control what you can control, and let things just play out, and cross those bridges when you get to them. And it's changed my life, because I try not, like I said, I grew up in a household where everything was an emergency and everything was horrible. And I love the fact that I can take a deep breath and go, okay, this sucks right now, but I know things that have sucked in the past have often turned out fine.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how I approach life. And I think that's as leaders, that's what we need to do too. Because I think there's too many leaders out there that see, a KPI that hasn't hit, or they had a bad month. Sales were down, and they blow it up like, oh my God, the company is going to be bankrupt, right? Mm.
Yeah, and I often wonder, Quinn, if that is a cultural thing as well. I'll tell you what, I don't know if you remember the toilet paper fiasco during the first 6 months of
Oh
COVID.
yeah, oh yeah. I got video of it in Walmart showing the
Yeah,
empty
yeah.
shelves.
Okay, so if we take that, do you think that mattered in India? Do you think it mattered in China? Do you think it mattered in Africa? So I think often, that toilet paper fiasco, even though it was funny, but it actually gave me some insight into culturally, if in India, we in the ICUs, if we don't even have oxygen tanks for people that are dying, is toilet paper a thing? No.
Mm.
Is my hair straightener not working today a thing? And then I take that same thing with attire, like clothing. I find that if we are going, say I'm doing a keynote, is it important for me to wear heels? Is it important for me to wear a business suit? So is it, if I showed up in an Indian suit, does that change my intellect? No. I did a post about this on LinkedIn, but
Mhm.
we're so focused on those external things that I think we've lost the actual coming back to grounding and centering. As you said, is my family okay? Is anybody on life support? Can I see, hear, eat, breathe, all those kinds of things? Oh, wait a minute. My breath that I just took in, an outgoing is not guaranteed. When I do my outgoing breath, my incoming is not guaranteed. I'm literally less than 2 minutes away from death every single time I breathe, Quinn. So that invisible expiry date that's stamped onto our body doesn't go anywhere, man. We still have to live, and we have to live this life of adventure. So
Mm.
therefore, the challenges of, "Oh, we don't have toilet paper," don't really matter in the whole scheme of things. But I think we've lost that compass, Clint, as to what really matters.
Yeah,
I think we've lost that compass.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I would suggest that that was the impetus for my wife and I, well, for me, leaving my corporate job and my wife and I moving out to here to British Columbia and starting a new life because, we're not promised anything. Whatever you want to call it, the universe, God, whatever, we're not promised tomorrow. And like you said, we're 2 minutes away from death. And it's important to understand what truly matters to you. And I mean, I know you got to pay the bills and people say, well, yeah, it's because you invested and now you have money. And it's like, no, but it's still about what is truly important to me, and I'm willing to live a little less rich, as you call it, or a little more frugally because what's important to me is spending time with my wife, spending time with my kids. And I think once again, when I speak to Gen Z and even millennials, I think that's what's important to them, and that's what's causing the clash in the workplace. And the Gen Z problem is business owners. These younger workers don't want overtime. They want time given back to them. They want to be recognized. They want to understand their purpose, their connection to what the company is doing, because their life matters. And this isn't. I hate. I've come to hate the term work-life balance because it's just been beaten to death. And I think if you love what you do, are you really working? Like I'll spend 12, 15 hours here in my studio and working on coaching and everything and I'll do it every day because I love it. And that work-life balance, there's no such thing anymore because I'm doing what I feel matters to me. And that's what these younger generations are trying to show us is that they're willing to live a little more frugally. They're willing to live in their parents' basements until they're 35, and some people might see that as being wrong. I had a doctor on that said, if you get along with your parents and your roommates, who cares? That's fine. He goes, in
Exactly.
some cultures, you have 3 or 4 generations living in the same house.
Yeah.
He said, find what matters to you and do that. And so I love that. I want to turn the corner and start to wrap things up here. This conversation, by the way, GV, has been incredible. But let's finish here.
Yeah.
If someone who's listening feels stuck in a results driven cycle, like it's all about accolades and accomplishments and they're trying to achieve something all the time, or even at work they work at a place where it's all about the results, and this is what EOR is trying to go against. But they're stuck in this results driven cycle. It's more about being a human doing than being a human being. What would you say to them, first of all, to try and get them out of that? And two, which of your books would you suggest they read to try and understand why being in a results-driven cycle is not productive for them?
So I'll start with the latter one. I would say quantum
Sure.
business, really, because for that type of a personality style, they understanding that this isn't woo-woo conversation. It's
Yeah.
based in quantum mechanics. So I would say the book is Quantum Business that they would read. Once they get comfortable with that, permission to be you might be the second one to
Mm,
understand how do we give ourselves permission to be ourselves. And then how do you get out of that cycle for that type of personality is challenge yourself. If you think, as a matter of fact, we're going to be next week, we're going to be putting up a challenge to say, if you think that you're all that, then I challenge you. I challenge you to challenge yourself to say, okay, this is the way I've done business before. I'm going to take one micro step to do a choice that's different and see what the result is and
mm,
see how it can be different. Because to sit back and say, oh, it doesn't work, it's too woo-woo, it's this and it's that, well, then great, because you're staying in the same headspace with the problems that created it. So more power to you if you think you're going to be able to get out of it. But this is an uncertain, volatile world coming up. So I would say challenge yourself and say, okay, one micro thing I'm going to do differently, and then let's see what the result is.
mm. Great answer. I love that. And that speaks on point to effort over results because we can't control the result. We can look at the goal, the result, the outcome that we want, and you can give it a name and you can give it a title or a deadline or timeline, but then set it and forget it and just focus on the day-to-day consistent disciplined effort that you put in. And if you don't achieve that result, let's say in 30 days, 3 months, whatever it is, you still will have grown. You still will have improved. You still will have become a better person for that pursuit. I love when I can't remember who said it, but they said it's not about the pursuit of happiness; it's happiness in the pursuit. And that to me is really what effort over results, and it sounds like quantum leadership is all about. And I love that our two philosophies are really in embroiled in one, overall philosophy, and that's beautiful. So final question, looking at the next decade of leadership, what role will heart, soul, and quantum play in shaping those leaders and how they will thrive in the next decade and beyond?
I would say that it would make them leading edge. They're the ones that will be pioneering, something that inevitably we will get to. I have the belief that this is not an option anymore. The new paradigm of leadership, which is not linear, which is embracing the complexity, which is understanding that there's infinite possibilities within this uncertain world, and where presence will be required is not an option anymore. So if you are willing to explore and be adventurous and to test out and challenge yourself, I would say that you would be a frontier.
Absolutely. I've espoused that before. The game has changed. It's completely changed. And if you're not on board with the new form of leadership, with the new form of what the workplace looks like, with psychological safety, and if you think it's woo-woo, well, that's fine, but you're not sustainable anymore. You can't keep fighting this, and the command and control leadership doesn't work anymore. And Gen Z is proving it doesn't work anymore, and they're fighting against it, and they're changing the way we lead. The younger generations are in general. So let's finish here. The corporate soul, permission to be you, heartfelt leadership, quantum business, peak performance, all great books. Where can people find them? Where can people get a hold of them? Because I think we've covered all five of them today in some form and manner, and I think all of them would be wonderful additions to people's business leadership and self-improvement. So where can they find them, and how do we promote?
Indeed. So all the books can be found on my website, which is quantumbusinessgrowth.ca. So all of them are readily available there, or of course, Amazon. They're all available there.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Jivi Saran, thank you very much for being here today. My first episode back in 6 weeks, and I'm so excited to be back in this chair and in my studio. And I couldn't have asked for a better guest on my first show back, episode number 40. Thank you very much for being here today on the EOR podcast.
And thank you, Quinn. I'm so honored. And honestly, you are the epitome of everything that is in that quantum business book. So please know that I'm absolutely honored and touched to have had this conversation, because time just flew. So thank you so much.
It did. Thank you, Jivi.